All right. One of the horrible things about CleoCon is I start losing my voice after about a day of seeing old friends, and hopefully after this we'll all be friends as well. Every one of you gets an individual hug. I'm very excited for that. We're going to talk about AI today, and I know there was a panel. I heard it was excellent yesterday. Maybe some of the same things will come up, but hopefully this will be a slightly different flavor in talking about the opportunities of AI. I know as lawyers, a lot of you like to talk about the issues with AI. One thing we're not going to talk about is like hallucinations and all that crap, but I'll get into it a bit later as to why I feel that that's kind of a red herring. The title of this is Why AI Will Save the Parenthetical Legal World. And I put that in parentheses because I actually stole the title from Marc Andreessen's white paper. So Marc Andreessen, the founder of Netscape, very successful venture capitalist in Silicon Valley, he wrote a great white paper on how AI is this incredibly positive force that will help us be better as humans. And we're just so missing that conversation in a lot of the media today that I was very proud of Marc, and I wanted to give him props and steal his title. But the first two lines could not set up this speech any better. He says, "The era of artificial intelligence is here, and boy, are people," lawyers are people too, "boy, are people freaking out. Fortunately, I'm here to bring the good news. AI will not destroy the world or the legal world or the legal industry, and in fact, may save it." And that's the setup. A little bit about me. I am a lawyer. I am a tech founder. I started Avo, and before that, I was part of the original team at Expedia. And so I've grown a company or two. I actually joined Expedia when it was still the Microsoft Travel Network within Microsoft. A lot of people have forgotten that Expedia even started within Microsoft. But I've been a Clio board member for roughly the last 5 years. Really an honor to work with this truly innovative company. One thing that is definitely true is I'm an AI investor, but that's pretty low stakes these days because any company that's worth their salt, and I would argue any law firm that's worth their salt, is thinking through their AI strategy and how they're going to incorporate it into their business. One thing that's definitely not true is I'm not an AI expert. I think to really be an expert, you have to have that engineering background to get into the nuts and the bolts of the technology and understand its use. But that doesn't mean that we as an industry, you as someone who's running their law firm, it doesn't mean that I, as an investor, can't be someone who understands it at a deep level and actually uses it, right? I mean, in the same way that, I don't know, how many of you really know what goes on in your car? You can kind of describe it, but you don't really know what's going on in that combustion engine or the electric engine or electric battery. And yet you can still enjoy it, right? Well, let's do the same thing with AI. And then finally, I'm probably the guy that introduced you to AI. You're like, what does that mean? Well, we attempted before the large AI models to simulate the same process that a sophisticated purchaser of legal services goes through when they're evaluating a lawyer's resume. And that was the Avo rating. And some of you love it and some of you hate it. Now, I've been gone from Avo for 5 years. I don't know where the Avo rating is now. But at that time, that was our very noble goal, was to simulate that sophisticated purchaser of legal services in the name of the consumer. And again, probably mixed results and mixed responses, where some loved it, some hated. Okay, enough about me. How do all of you feel about me? No, just joking. Let's talk about you and your fears, and let's only talk about the lawyerly one. There's all sorts of research on this, but I've lived this, and I know that this is accurate, that the fears that you have as lawyers and running your firms, whether they're big firms or small firms, really boil down like this. Number one fear is mistakes. You are so afraid. I used to be so afraid of the mistakes that I made or I didn't even know I made that might be dead bodies that show up years later in documents that I drove for my clients. Money, that's a constant issue, whether you're a small firm and trying to keep the doors open, or a big firm and wondering if the other partners are getting paid more, or they're spending too much money, or even if the firm itself is going to be able to keep the doors open. Mistakes in money, those are the big ones, man. They sit on top, not to downgrade process management and technology, but both process and technology kind of feed into that. If you don't have the right processes, the right technology, it tends to lead to less money and more mistakes. But process management, you think about it, whether it is how your firm is run or how you're running a specific case or a specific deal for a customer, there are a lot of fears around whether you have the right people, the right processes in place to get all the train cars to line up so that you can do great things and succeed in the goal for your firm or your client. And then technology, maybe all of this rides on technology, but there's a lot of phobia around technology in the legal industry to where you're like, oh my God, there are all these solutions and how do they work together? And oh my God, it's overwhelming, right? Well, the interesting thing, if you interview your clients from a general counsel all the way down to the person that's hiring you to, I don't know, do an NDA or going through a divorce, they have the exact same fears. Exactly. They talk about it a little bit differently, but their concerns are that, have I hired the right lawyer? Is the lawyer that I've hired, is he or she going to make mistakes that mess up my deal or my divorce or whatever it may be? Are they charging me the right amount of money? Am I paying them too much? They're never worried about paying you too little, by the way. Processes. So, and sorry, if we get through the end of this and I haven't lost my voice, it's going to be amazing. So, for this small customer, they are looking for processes that don't make them think, that don't make it hard. So as they're onboarding and starting to communicate with you, is it very easy to have that conversation, to get you the documents, et cetera? They want those don't make me think, don't make it hard processes, all the way up to the general counsel who's wondering whether you're running efficient, smart processes that are going to allow them to be successful. And then technology, often that goes hand in hand with do you have technology that is going to drive the processes that are going to allow us to win, that are going to save us some money and ultimately get you to success? But there's much less phobia as you get into the big clients. They're often imposing their technology on you rather than just hoping that yours is great. But it's still this kind of 4-quadrant set of fears that is dominating the entire conversation, whether it be with you within your firm or you with your clients. Okay, so what if, and this isn't going to be a big reveal, but what if there was a single piece of technology, or maybe let's call it a collection of technologies, but coming into the one big bundle that could alleviate every one of these areas? It's never going to make them go away in its entirety, but what if there was one thing? And the big reveal, artificial intelligence. Okay, now I put this very simple definition up here because it's an important point. First of all, I give it Investopedia, like just keep it simple, stupid. Artificial intelligence, I put this definition and wanted to keep their branding because they just say simply, it is the simulation of human intelligence by software-coded heuristics, okay? All that is it's the simulation, and we're going to hit this over and over. Simulation, it is not real human intelligence, okay? It is simulating things through software, through math, through orders of operation. That's all artificial intelligence is. Now, I just want to touch, we'll talk about machine learning, which is a subset of artificial intelligence. Machine learning is just when you take statistics, when you take a data set, typically a structured data set, and that data, you ask it to go from point A to point B, it actually, if it can't get to point B, it can use statistical analysis to take another guess at how you get to point B. That's machine learning. And then a subset of machine learning is deep learning, and that is when you have bigger data sets with less structure. That's all deep learning is, okay? So we use all these big words, but all we're trying to do is simulate. That's it. That's all it is. Now, what's fascinating, I understand some of the fear that has come with artificial intelligence, right? So if you look at everything from Hollywood, it's this idea that if you create a beautiful cyborg, she will escape. Well, she'll kill you first and then escape. If you put your information out on the web, terrorists will try to kill you. If you fly a spaceship, the AI HAL will try to take over the spaceship. Terminator's coming to kill John Connor. If you have Siri or Alexa or whatever, you're going to fall in love with it. They're going to ruin your life. And then Blade Runner, one of the greatest movies based on one of the greatest books of all time for me. If you've never read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? What an amazing book about technology and what it means to be human. But anyway, and it's funny, I look at this when I was putting these slides together, and oh my God, look at all the red. I mean, holy cats. Could they make it any more alarming? Like full stop sign, holy shit, we've got a problem with all this technology. Now, I would argue that rather than red, when we're talking about AI, we should focus on yellow, okay? Because in reality, if you peel back what AI is, I believe that it's more of a toaster than it is the Terminator, okay? So the toaster is just a very simple piece of technology that is designed to do very specific things. And that is what AI is today. Now, it does some special things in that it's painted with an enamel with a cute face and can do some, can probably toast some SpongeBob face on the on your bread, on your toast, but it's only doing that which is specific. Okay. Now I understand when we looked at Broadway, when we looked at Hollywood, I understand some of the fear that's been blown in there because it's sensational. But where we are with the technology, and we'll get into this, is so much closer to it being a toaster than it is a Terminator. Now you say, Mark, that's not correct because like Elon Musk told me so. I mean, it's more dangerous than nukes. You have Google, you have Jeffrey Hinton, who's one of the fathers of AI. You have all of these leaders within technology, and granted from very big companies saying this stuff's dangerous and we need to regulate it, right? You've heard it, you've read it repeatedly, okay? What you don't hear is the other side of the equation where you have other fathers of AI. You have, you have people that have spent their entire lives building these machines who have said, no, this is completely overblown. And in fact, there is something a bit more insidious going on. I put in the middle here, Bill Gurley. I encourage all of you to go and listen to Bill's speech at the All In Summit, the All In podcast. I don't know how many of you listen to it. I don't really listen to it, but it's very popular. And it's some Silicon Valley guys, and Bill spoke at it, and he talked about the problem with regulatory capture in AI, okay? So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the regulatory capture concept, but I absolutely lived with this with Expedia and the airlines. But the idea is that all of these big companies, and Bill makes a very persuasive argument, that all of these big companies are waving their hands and saying that things need to be regulated because they are the ones that are closest to the regulators and give all the money to the regulators and will be able to be the ones that draft the regulations that puts them in the pole position to drive AI and restrict entrance. Please listen to this. It is a super important speech, and I'm not saying that just because Bill was ABBA's first investor. He's truly a venture capitalist that looks around corners. So keep that regulatory capture issue in mind. Now let's just definitionally, before we dive into things, narrow AI versus general AI. This is why I call it the toaster. This is where we are today. Narrow AI, it's inferior to human intelligence. It's also known as weak AI. It doesn't have any consciousness, no cognitive abilities. So you have IBM Watson, you have AlphaGo that was created by DeepMind, which was a company that was purchased by Google. So some names you've absolutely heard, but it can't solve any unfamiliar problems. Like, you have to tell it to go make paper clips, and that's all it can do. It can't jump over to start building, computers or bombs or whatever we're worried about. Now, general AI, this is what you see in the media. This is what you see in all the entertainment. This is the Terminator. It's similar, if not superior, to human intelligence. It's known as AGI or AI or full AI. It has consciousness, it has cognitive abilities, and it can solve these unfamiliar problems. But we are so far away from getting to anything that is general AI that I just think we've completely sensationalized it to the point that we've created a huge issue that doesn't need to be there. Now, I get it. A lot of you are saying, have you used ChatGPT? You don't even know what you're talking about. Okay, maybe let's actually talk about what ChatGPT is. There's no consciousness in this. It's not sentient. Let's just talk about what ChatGPT is. What ChatGPT is a deep learning, it's a machine learning, deep learning model that is able to take all types of data, load it into a platform, and by processing it, creating parameters, associated parameters, it's able to take that data, associate it, and generate information, right? They can extract information, they can follow instructions, object recognition and captioning, etc. And Q&A is something that has just totally fascinated everyone as to how well it works. Now, in these large language models, I just want to make sure we understand the construct. You have an infrastructure, just like the human brain. You have something that it rides on top of, like Clio. Like, you have this base that the software will ride on top. And then, just like your brain, you put all of the data into the infrastructure, it searches that data, it synthesizes it, and then it generates it generates speech or images or what have you. So this is the large language model map, and these are all the different companies that are going after this. And so a lot of companies, and it's just growing exponentially, both the companies and the amount of computing that is going into it. Large language models are fascinating because when any of you you make a statement in a brief, you're thinking, if I were to ask you how many variables went into that statement, a lot of you would say, well, there's probably 20, 30, and you could name them off for me. The reality is, from your time of birth, your instinct, all of your everything you've learned over the years, it all layers on to the point that you're literally dealing with millions of variables that are coming to bear for just one statement that you make in a brief. And so you go, God, that's a lot. Well, it's not, because when we compare them to the large language models, it would look like this. The overlay would be so detailed that you wouldn't be able to see it. You can't make sense of it. And this is where we get messed up as humans. The numbers are so massive. The number of parameters that we're dealing with are so massive that it starts to break down, and that's where the fear steps in. So this is what the growth in large language models, the number of parameters, in AI has looked like just since 1950, and really just focused on 2000 to 2020. I mean, it is a massive hockey stick of the number of parameters that are being associated. So it's not only the number of data points that they can have, but it's the associations among those data points that it gets into the exponential world to the point that the human brain cannot get its arms, if brains have arms, can't get its arms around. The human brain just kind of blows up because it's too large of numbers. And that's why they seem so amazing. But all they're doing is acting just like a brain in that they're searching that information, they're synthesizing it through associations, and they're regurgitating. That's it. But they're just pulling from these massive, massive models, so it feels magical. Now, this magic is real in that it allows us to power all types of things in our businesses. So if you read through every one of these, I mean, it really touches every part of the business. And in the same way, it's not only any business, it's also a law firm. Now, I know a lot of you, if you look at the icons, you're like supply chain, operations management. We don't do that. We're not a manufacturing company. Yes, you are. Okay. You run a contract manufacturing, you run a brief manufacturing, you run a legal argument manufacturing business. And so when it comes to legal, there's this weird argument where it's like, okay, I'm afraid of the cyborgs. They're all coming in. And you almost want to just disassociate and say, this is a separate world that doesn't touch me. It absolutely touches you. And that's part of what I want to get through today. And in order to get it through, as we get into some specific examples, anybody who's heard me speak, this comes up every single time. I just ask you that rather than issue spotting, let's focus on the opportunities. Of course, anything that's new is going to be fraught with issues. It's about the opportunity and how we drive the industry forward. Okay, so I think Jack, are you here? Did you steal this in your keynote? I'm sorry, I was flying in. Okay, all right. Well, it's Goldman Sachs, so that's probably the proper attribution. But so this is Goldman Sachs did a big study on AI and where it's going to impact. Basically, it says there'll be 25% penetration in most industries. That's the light blue right here. But then it said, where is it really going to impact? Well, one's legal. You can, if you can see the red, that's 44 over on the other side on the far left, and then 46 for office and administrative support. Now, a lot of you will go, oh no, like office and administrative support, we don't do that. No, that's like half of legal. Okay, so it is going to hit legal squarely. Then this slide's actually very similar in that it's saying, okay, dark blue means that it's not going to penetrate. There'll be no automation at 0 to 10%. Light blue is that there'll be intermediate, 10 to 49% automation. And then if you have gray in your bar, you're in trouble, okay? Gray, there's legal, and there is office and administrative support. So Goldman Sachs, their study says that AI is coming quickly into legal. Very similarly, if you talk to general counsels or even law firms, this is from Thomson Reuters, they will say that over half of them say, yeah, no, this is coming into legal and it's coming very quickly. Now, a lot of you will respond to this. And okay, let's talk about one of the issues that I hear repeatedly. It says, the thing I don't like about AI is that it's going to displace a bunch of legal talent, right? All this talent, what are people going to do? They went to law school and now they're going to be replaced by machines. Okay, this is the problem of something called the lump of labor fallacy. And what the lump of labor fallacy is that in any industry, in any discrete set of work, the idea is that when automation comes in, when technology comes in, that everything's going to stay the same. When the reality is that when automation and when technology comes in, it tends to blow up the entire model so that the type of work shifts. And for legal, I just can't tell you. I'm gonna I'll show you where I'd love to see you working, but I'd love to see you working on the highest, most artistic part of the profession, rather than down, mucking through all this content generation, et cetera, that could be handled by machines. And in fact, when you look, this is getting to be old data. You've probably seen it so many times. I mean, this at AVO, we developed this data. ABA Foundation, or excuse me, the American Bar Foundation, World Justice Project, everybody's done a similar study on this that basically says for people who have income levels of $85,000 and up, half of them are not using lawyers. Okay, so just, if you want to get rid of the lump, this is just within the existing work set, right? The existing discrete set of tasks, so the rules that you've all set up with your monopoly, and it says that half of the people who come to the monopoly, they don't use you. They don't like you. You scare them away. You think you're fearful of technology? There's fear of lawyers because they don't know what you do. They think you're too expensive, etc. So if we could just solve that, we would double the size of the existing set. There is so much work to do in legal, and I would love to see all of you doing less of the administrative and more of the art of lawyering. Okay, so let's dive into these 4 areas that are the fears of both you and your clients. And, if I'd say to you, which do you want to talk about first? Everybody says, I want to talk about money, of course. Okay, let's talk about money. Now, as a setup to this, and this is where I'm talking about where I'd love to see you working. This is from last year's presentation here at ClioCon. Hopefully you were all here. I don't know. There were thousands of people here, so I can't count them all. That's a joke. It was about this size crowd. But the quick setup here is that I call this the pyramid of consumer demand. And at the bottom of the pyramid, that is where you have the most consumers coming in. They're researching. And then they might, I use as the example, estate planning. They come in and ask, do I need a will? Well, you say, well, I can get you a simple will, and that's a commodity, and you can easily stamp that out. You can make some slight revisions to that commodity will. Maybe you had a charitable grant. We call that the tailored commodity level. And then at the very top, that is where you're truly being an artisan, is that you're cutting stuff from whole cloth. And that is that is the tailored level and that custom estate plan. That is that bespoke suit. Okay, your job that we talked about last year is to get people in at the bottom where, by the way, your lowest margins are. That's where you're going to make the least amount of money per customer. But your job is to cross-sell them up to the top where you'll actually have the least number of customers in the end, but the highest margins. Okay, that's your job as a lawyer. Have all that stuff down there at the bottom, get it up sold to the top. Okay. Now, what if, another big what if AI did this at the commodity and research levels? Okay. So what if it created advertising copy for you? What if it placed that paid advertising for you? What if it analyzed your most effective ads or website pages? What if it created website blog content for you? What if it optimized your landing pages? What if it generated and delivered personalized content through email or TikTok or whatever it is to potential clients? What if it engaged potential clients before they left your website and said, hey, how can we help you? And they answered questions about the subject matter, your background, etc., made them more comfortable with you as a person. What if they had meaningful conversations about whether you could help them, and if you couldn't, actually referred them on to another lawyer that's willing to pay you for that referral? What if it ran a conflicts check in real time and delivered the engagement letter? And by the way, I can hear the issues just going off. Focus on the opportunities, okay? What if it synthesized all of your different intake software and processes? What if it estimated the value of a client in both today's case that they're talking about and their lifetime value to decide whether you'd take them on? What if it assembled documents up in that commodity layer, a simple will, an NDA, whatever it might be? What if you decide to get more involved and they suggest provisions for you? What if it reviewed, like, okay, lawyers make mistakes all the time. There are all these different documents they bring with them. Well, what if AI could review that and flag issues for you so that you could have higher margin at that research or commodity level? What if it did all this? Well, the reality is every bit of this is coming into legal now, okay? There are companies that are writing code. Some, I'll give you an example. Is Kevin O'Keefe here? So Lou by LexBlog just announced today that they are going to do AI blog content creation. That's my 4th bullet there. I could go through and name a company that is doing every one of these things today, and it's going to come roaring in. But don't fear it. It's going to be awesome. Because if you don't have to deal with this bullshit at the bottom of the layer, and you can keep it within your firm and not have to pay some intermediary like Avo, isn't that awesome? Okay, This is happening. Now, what if we move to the top of the pyramid? What if AI did this at the top, in your artistry, within your artistry, okay? What if it's summarized, like you get a case that comes in and it immediately generates for you a summary of all relevant case law that you can read and absorb before your client meeting or to understand whether you'd like to take the case? What if it suggested relevant educational content like law review articles or bar articles or videos from YouTube or whatever it might be so that you can have that analytical overlay? What if it generated and delivered and retrieved all documents you need from relevant parties as you're sussing out the case? I mean, if we think about it in estate planning, there's all this stuff you need from the client, from their accountants, et cetera. But maybe it's personal injury and you need the police report and you need insurance documentation. There's a bunch of stuff that today paralegals just fire all this stuff out as the case comes in. What if it preliminarily interviewed parties, potential witnesses? What if it reviewed all relevant documents in the case and scored their relevancy and accuracy? What if it generated drafts of memos, briefs, depositions, outlines so that you could start with those drafts and then put your human touch onto them? What if it flagged a witness when a witness is potentially lying? What if it scored opposing counsel's work? What if it updated clients on the status of their case? I was just listening to someone talking about how often they're having to talk to their clients and hold hands. What if it managed all dates and deadlines, no matter how major or minor? What if they summarized and assigned judges' rulings on the issues in your case? What if it assigned the probability of a favorable ruling from an assigned judge? That would really be interesting for settlement issues. What if it estimated your settlement probabilities? And what if there was software that could allow you to track all of this with great visualization tools? You know what I'm going to say? Well, that's pretty awesome, but all of this is already happening, okay? This is built or in the process of being built in legal right now, okay? Don't fear it. Get all excited. Because how many times in your life have you run into a situation where a tool can drive down expense and at the same time increase revenue? I'm telling you, I've been in the business industry for a long time and these things seldom come along. But that is AI and legal. It is allowing us operationally as we work through that pyramid of consumer demand, what great news that it can drive down expense and increase revenue at the same time. Okay, that's the good news. Let's talk about the bad news. This is not a mocked up website. You can go Google it right now. AI lawyer, I think .com. This is the business people getting in there. So your lawyers going after the business side, you're going to have business people that are using AI to come in and compete with you. This is real copy. Say goodbye to expensive consultations, long waits for appointments, and confusing legal texts. In other words, lawyers suck. Let us be the AI lawyer ready to give you expert legal help anytime, anywhere. This is a real business. Issues. I know, I get it. I'm just telling you that the bad news is that business people are going to leverage AI to come in, and we as an industry need to get in front of it. Okay, that's money. Let's talk about mistakes. So the mistakes, I don't think, are going to be that shocking to you. So this comes from the ABA Standing Committee on Professional Responsibility, or professional liability in this instance. So you can read these, but it's, failing to properly apply the law, that's like 11%. Man, that's fascinating to me. Planning errors, inadequate discovery or investigation, failure to file documents when there's no deadline, failure to calendar properly. That's like basically failing to file documents when there is a deadline. But it's like, this is like basic stuff, and we're failing in it. Now, why is that? Now, on top of that, I went through, by the way, this scrolls too fast, my apologies, but I went through and just looked at all the different websites on where are lawyers being sanctioned and having problems. And it just all boils down to this. We have too much on our plates, okay? So when you think about the factual record and what technology is allowing us to collect through discovery or otherwise, that whole factual record, and then all of the case law that is exponentially growing, and then all of the processes and everything associated to an individual case, it's too much. We cannot, our human brains, I realize we're being paid to be the stewards of these processes, but it's too much. It's too much data. And to give you an example, like I just went through a piece of litigation. Sadly, it was personal litigation. And the judge and the lawyers just missed some fundamental stuff, right? And you're like, this judge just totally missed on some case law. And how? I mean, this judge, a very bright person. But what happened? How did that happen? How did the lawyers miss it? Right? And had to go on to appeal and until we could clean it up. Well, there's just too much out there. So the beauty of AI is that the machine and all of those trillion parameters has the ability to read every single fact, to read every single case, and to help you navigate the process so that lawyers can get back to getting in control and not constantly fearing that they're too overwhelmed and they're kind of hiding it, and it's going to cause a bunch of mistakes, right? That's your fear. And you're just like, I'm not Superman. I can't do all this. And I agree. And let's get machines in there to help. And this is why you have Thomson Reuters. They just paid $650 million for case text because they look at that as that AI tool and the progress that it's made as one of the futures in lawyers generating legal documents. Here's just very briefly what that piece of technology does, and this is their Compose tool, and this is really where TR got in and got excited and bought them. I don't know how many use case text, by the way? Some of you, okay? So it's pretty interesting. You can create your outline and then you associate some of the law, and it actually generates provisions that you'll ultimately end up plugging into your brief. That's pretty fascinating that it has what appears from the numbers to be a pretty effective generation tool relying on LLM. Here's a company that I'm an investor in. This is called Clearbrief. Clearbrief, I love that they plug in as their Word plugin, but what it can do is you can take any legal document, and let's say that you're reviewing this as a senior partner or as a judge or as a senior associate, and you can see the association that someone has made or the citation that someone has made either to the factual record or to the case law, and you can see in the middle whether that is the appropriate citation. Yellow says it's not, and then you go down to the suggestions, and green tells you where the best citation is in this instance in the record, and it actually refers you over, it's a case, and it refers you over so you can see exactly where that case is. Now remember when I said to you, wouldn't it be cool if you could review opposing counsels and see their errors? That was a setup, and some of you laughed. This is exactly what this does. You can load in a brief from opposing counsel and see where they've fudged the factual record or the case law. What I probably love about it the most, though, is you can just type and make an assertion, and it'll tell you how well in probability numbers, like from red, green, yellow, how well that assertion is supported by the record or the case law. You don't have to spend days searching for this stuff. And then we're also seeing it come into e-discovery. So e-discovery, such an important part of the getting it right, and just way too much documentation, right? And this creates so much fear when you're coming down to trial and suddenly a document comes out of nowhere, right? There are some rules around this, but it happens all the time. Getting this right in AI is super, super important. And I think it'll be really good for all of us not to be fearing that mistake. We're also seeing it in legal research. I don't know if Ed Walters is here. He could talk about it forever. He's right there. And they're doing all sorts of cool things at Fastcase as well. Okay. It's not only our mistakes, though, the lawyers' mistakes. It's our clients before they even get to us. And how many times have you sat down with a client and been like, I wish you wouldn't have done that? Now, I used to show these slides back when I was talking about Avvo in the lawyer marketplace. And what I used to say to lawyers is that what I want is that when you get pulled over, say, potentially for a DUI, I want an Avvo lawyer in the car with you, okay? I want you to be able to push a button and have that lawyer sitting there. There's an app for that. Okay, just hold that, Joe. So the beauty of AI is this, it brings it. Now, by the way, when I used to bring this up, people's brains would just explode. I mean, if we could have gone to a whiteboard and written down issues, it would have been just like, oh, let me tell you all the problems. But AI, and this is not hyperbole, today can tell you when you've been in an accident, when you've been pulled over. It can run an immediate conflicts check. It can have you signed up and be present for that customer in that traffic stop, in that time of need. Maybe it's not within the car. Now, all of this isn't wired today, but it's coming to where we can be present at any difficult time within our customers' lives and help them not make stupid mistakes. Okay, let's talk about process. So again, I'll go back. I really want to hammer home this point. When I showed you these top AI use cases, operations management and supply chain, this is a way we need to start thinking much more as an industry. We don't think of ourselves as businesses. We don't think of ourselves running manufacturing lines. We do, okay? And so you're starting to see some of this in different marketing, but I'll just go back to this pyramid of consumer demand. I mean, from the time you bring someone in at the bottom who is just researching whether they need a will, all the way to to drafting that custom estate plan or representing them in front of a judge or a jury or whatever that kind of terminal event is for that existing case. I mean, if we turn this on its side, it's just a supply chain with the chunks and the train tracks that go along. I highly encourage every one of you to start thinking about what your supply chain looks like. That was a speech from last year. You are seeing, so this is some clear brief marketing that I wasn't involved in, but maybe some of my thinking seeped in to where they're saying, hey, the litigation drafting process, that's a supply chain. And they're talking about all the ways that they can save you time within that supply chain. But I'm just trying to reinforce that we're starting to see some of that manufacturing thinking come in, and it's a very important thing. Now, when we talk about processes, there's so much we could be doing that when I give you some of these examples, it's going to feel a little bit like scattershot, but I just can't cover it all within the time that we have allotted. And so I just want to give you some cool examples, or at least stuff that I think is cool. Okay, so let's talk about law firms first and law firm process, the internal process. If you run a technology company and you're building your own software, one of the things that is critical is knowledge transfer, because people come and go. And as people write code, that code is very detailed. And you want to make sure that people are able to pick up that code and continue to develop it, right? They're called libraries, software libraries, developer libraries, and it's just a huge part of the housekeeping in a technology company. What's beautiful about open source, and Android is open source, whereas something like iOS with Apple is closed source, Android has these massive libraries where millions of people are going in and uploading their code and keeping the libraries up to date. Now, there's some messiness in that because you have so many people in there, and that's kind of the positive and negative of open source versus closed source. But the point is, there is a culture of knowledge transfer. Now, a big problem with lawyers and in firms is that you have all these lawyers that are kind of acting as independent entities, and when they unplug, all that knowledge goes with them, or they die. God forbid that they die, and all that knowledge goes with them, okay? Knowledge transfer is something within our supply chain that we just haven't thought about as an industry. And this is what knowledge transfer looks like in the legal industry. We go to CLEs or we sit within a firm and, a couple of older partners kind of wax poetically about what things look like. But I'd like to ask, does anyone in this room have a procedure for knowledge transfer for any lawyer that has ever worked in your firm? Raise your hand. Okay, a couple of you. This is so important for you to run your firm today or in the future and be able to leverage into things like associates or paralegals or even AI is this knowledge transfer. But AI can help you do it. And I'll bring up another company that I'm invested in. Now this is not for law firms, but the same idea is going to come into law firms. So tangibly is for trade secrets. So because of the Defense of Trade Secrets Act of 2016, you can now defend trade secrets a lot like you can patents. But what tangibly does is it has this AI that they call their X-ray platform that you unleash it within a company, and it goes and finds all of your trade secrets, gets them indexed, and associates them with owners within the company so that the trade secrets can be protected and checked in and checked out, et cetera. Highly technical, but companies absolutely love it. So why isn't there a tangibly for all of the documents? I mean, think of the terabytes of information that you have in your law firm, okay? All of this there should be AI that goes around and goes through and finds all of the information, indexes it, synthesizes it, and makes it so that it is perfectly accessible to somebody new coming into your firm, so that an associate comes into your firm and says, could you please tell me about any cases in Alabama involving med mal in, I don't know, whatever case. You can tell us never. And be able to get an AI-generated summary of everything that the firm has touched and how it dealt with it. That is not hard. We just have to build the software. It's to the point, Tangibly's built it for an adjacent industry. It's going to come to legal. Similarly, this is one of the coolest things. I mean, new drugs. AI is developing new drugs. The issue is that there are so many parameters, so many compounds and how they interact that when you look at mixing various compounds, whether that's 2 compounds or 2,000, and then all of their association, it becomes a huge exponential informational and discovery problem. But AI has the power to do that, and they're coming up with new drugs that we're testing today because humans just couldn't get there as fast as the machines. Okay? So why is that not in legal? We'll start with you. That's probably most interesting. When you are sitting down and making any statement as it relates to an argument you're making potentially in front of a judge that's going to go in a brief, why shouldn't the machine be telling you whether that is the best argument that you could be making as it relates to the facts, the case law, or even public policy? Now, a number of you are like, screw public policy, I just want to win the case. Okay, but the point being that machines should be able to tell you, and I mean, the technology's there. I'm just talking about moving it in and pointing it at legal to take in all of those elements and tell you whether you are making the best argument for your case that you can. And very similarly, I mean, a judge should be able to sit there and when they're considering a motion maybe one of the bigger motions where they're sitting back in their chambers and deciding what to do, and actually plug that in and have it talk to them about how this conflicts with other law in the state, how it conflicts with other states' laws, how it affects public policy. I mean, this even goes to legislation. One of the reasons that legislation is so immensely inefficient is that you have all these people telling you what they think, rather than actually bringing data to bear in how what we do here affects over there and affects other laws that might conflict, etc. AI can help with this, again, with the human overlay of having people who care, looking at it and then testing it. Okay. Meet LEQ, the robot who wants to keep grandma company. This is real, okay? And this was in the Washington Post, and they're actually finding that these devices that keep older people company work incredibly well with depression and anxiety. Who else has a lot of depression and anxiety? Your customers. And they are constantly eating up your team's time, calling in and saying, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? And you're on the phone, you're like, oh my gosh, Mr. Jones, I know, I get it. Let me explain this to you. The idea that you can have a device that may just simply be their iPhone that answers a lot of questions for them, or when they dial into your client portal, all of this can be there to, if it can keep grandma company, it can keep your clients company as well. And a lot less hand-holding, which is that clerical administrative BS, that's a good thing. And then similarly, I was actually in the room when the Alexa development team was pitching this through a venture capital firm that I work with from time to time. And the whole idea was, there was a doctor who was pitching this idea that one of the hardest things for them in medicine efficacy is actually getting people to do what you've asked them to do. Where else is that a problem? In legal. I mean, how often, we could go through all the different types of examples, but how often do you ask for documents or action from your customers and they just don't do it? It just drives you batty, and you're chasing them down, you're trying to be there for them, and you're going to make mistakes, and it's going to cost you money. And anyway, through Alexa, they can follow up and say, have you done this? Have you done that? Have you done that? And they've seen a real nice rise in efficacy around different drugs by following up and being their friend. Well, AI can do the exact same thing with your customers, particularly your consumer customers, rather than your general counsel customers, in setting reminders and helping them be part of your process. And then finally, this is AI-driven project management tools. They're everywhere. I just picked one example, and they're coming to legal. Okay, this idea where they go in just like tangibly, and they suck up all this information as it relates to your operations, and then creates it in a very visually comforting way so that you as a manager can see where things are. Imagine if this is a case, and who's working on each case, and where are they, and how it all hangs together to get to that endpoint. So we're going to see a lot more of this in the practice of law, AI-driven project management. Okay. Have about 5 minutes, and then we'll hit technology, and we'll all go home or drink, one of the two. Yeah, okay. Yeah, Joe says drink. Okay, here we go. Technology. Now, again, this is the base, but man, listen, I consider myself a pretty technical guy, all right? And yet, even though I know what all these modules do, I don't know how often I feel like this, where I just can't get my iPhone to talk to my computer, to talk to my Alexa. Like, we have all these really cool apps, and I love them all, and I understand what they do, but when I'm trying to get them to be interoperable, it's a disaster. And really, I just like, I don't know what to do. There's no customer service. I don't know what to do. So especially in firms, you hear this from firms all the time. A lot of the technology phobia comes in to where they say, listen, I get what all this does, right? I get all the pieces, but I can't, I am not an engineer and I can't afford to hire an IT person. This is complicated stuff, okay? That interoperability problem is being attacked or being tackled by AI. So here's one, Flow. Tie your apps together, set yourself free. You're going to see more of this that helps you kind of be a technologist, because the AI assistant, you tell it what you're looking for and you say, hey, across my entire supply chain, from the time that I look from the client to I land the client, that I run them through my process to decide whether we're actually going to work on their case or we're just going to try to settle it, all the way up to the judge or jury or a merger or whatever it is. I have all these pieces of technology. That is my workbench. Can AI lace them together for you, optimize them, have them work at their highest order? The answer is yes. Very similarly, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Copilot. Copilot is in the software development world. It's never going to be part of your world directly, but it's an interesting intro to where we're headed on this. So I'm mixing technologies a little bit, but just bear with me, okay? One thing that is going to change your lawyerly lives is something called low-code or no-code applications, okay? So again, you're not technologists, and you're just like, I can't keep all this technology straight. I just want it to do things. I just want it to do these things. With Copilot, the way it works with developers is it takes all this public code and text and other information from the web. It puts it up into the OpenAI Codex model, which is also the model that drives ChatGPT. It has its own processing, but what it does is when someone's developing, just like case text or clear brief, it actually suggests modules to say, hey, drop in this piece of code. I think this is what you're trying to do. And huge chunks of code are brought in from Copilot. This has changed development, okay? Because now you have an AI assistant that says, I think you're going there. Let me just drop in that provision, okay? Can anybody see where I'm going with this? I mean, in everything that you do in writing contracts, writing briefs, what have you, it's just an algorithm. It's just code. You're writing code to persuade a judge. Having a Copilot there that is going to drop in provisions for you, and then you're going to use your human mind to optimize it, that's coming, and it's coming quickly. And it's going to be awesome, because it's going to allow you to think about the esoteric points rather than sitting around looking at parentheticals and the minutia of making sure that you have, I don't know, your commas and your periods in the right place. Now, this is a bit of low code, no code, because you're not, the developer is not writing the code. It's just taking the suggestions. And we're going to see there are so many companies attacking this that it's going to get really interesting in a hurry. So let me show you how it's working in HR, for example. This comes out of the Microsoft Copilot software, where you can say, okay, I have one piece of software that collects resumes. I have another that duplicates resumes that have come in, duplicates search cases, new candidate notifications. Maybe they're coming in through Facebook. Maybe then I need a recruiter to review it. And you go through and you basically just tell it what are the different options or the different steps that you would like to take in putting together the breadcrumbs to accomplish a task. And you just tell it and you say, and by the way, when I usually do this task, it's associated with this program. When I do this task, it's associated with this program. And by the way, I'd like to do this task. I don't have any program. I don't have any application associated with it. Today, in other industries, this has not been built today for legal, but it's coming, and it's coming in a hurry. You're going to have the ability to build workflows without putting in any code, and AI will associate the applications in order to have a very nice set of train cars that gets your workflow to that terminal event, that successful event, to where you succeed in what you're trying to do. Okay. And by the way, some of you are going to be like, this low code, no code, it's not coming to legal. Well, I mean, here is one of the Gold Microsoft partners, Barhead, a consulting firm. 5 skills lawyers need to use no-code platforms more effectively. Like, they're already advertising this stuff. And it reminds me of a great quote from another sci-fi novelist, William Gibson, who says, "The future's already here, it's just not evenly distributed." And I think just about everything that I've talked about today, I just can't reinforce enough. The future's here. It's just not always gotten to you. And that doesn't mean that it's not here at all, which, don't put your head in the sand. It is here. It hasn't gotten to you, but it's coming, and please be proactive. So in closing, I don't think I could have given this speech without actually asking AI, will artificial intelligence, by the way, this is just ChatGPT, replace lawyers? Here's what the machine told me. While AI is already making inroads, basically says it's unlikely to replace lawyers entirely. This is verbatim. Because of complex legal judgment, because of client relationships, because of adaptability and creativity, because of ethics. And it summarized it by saying the legal profession is multifaceted. The role of lawyers extends beyond tasks that can be automated. Therefore, while AI will continue to be a valuable tool for lawyers, it is unlikely to replace them entirely, especially in roles that require complex judgment, human interaction, and ethical considerations. In other words, it's revealing that it is simulating humans, but it's not human. And we can have the machines do certain buildups for us, and then we go in, and as the artists and the ethical humans that care, we can do the overlay that allows us and our clients to operate at our highest potential. That is the limitation of AI, but it's also our future. So all I ask all of you is just go out there, be your ethical selves, be human, and we're going to continue to build an amazing industry that is legal. Thank you.